Zoysia grass will one day be the dominant cultivar in home lawns in Australia.
Okay, interesting.
That's their view. It may not be, 10, 20, 30 years, but their view is, and seeing what I see now, I share that view that will one day be the case.
Okay, welcome to the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. In today's episode, we have Joe Rogers from Lawn Solutions Australia, which is the country's largest network of turf suppliers. And what Joe does is a fascinating role, no matter how humble he is and how much he tries to understand it. He actually has a huge role to play in whether or not turf varieties actually get to Australia. So if you've heard of TifTuf, if you've heard of Zoysia Australis, these are sort of things that he's been working on to help get them, doing the research, doing the field testing. He's got a lot of really interesting insights into turf. He's a very smart, knowledgeable guy, even if he is quite humble and likes to downplay it. Look, I really enjoyed this podcast. I love it when we have people on, and look, this is a lot of our guests. We've been very blessed, if not all of our guests, to be honest, at this stage. We've been very blessed with people who are humble, eager to help out and share, and just likable people. Look, this is a good, fun podcast. I hope you enjoy it, because I definitely did. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. We have a very special guest. We have Joe Rogers here from Lawn Solutions Australia. Joe, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate.
Great. Very excited, Luke. Thanks for having me.
I was saying to you before, I love the podcast that you do. I wish it was longer because it's that good. You know, some podcasts, to be fair, I can only make it about 20 minutes before I'm bored. Yours is 20 minutes. I want more. So
it's all over.
If you guys haven't found it before, you got to jump on there first. Joe, you it sounds like you do the interview, but you don't run the technical side. Is that what's going on there? You're the pretty face that sells it all.
I'm the face that does it all. Let's not use too many adjectives when it comes to my looks, but yeah, I conduct the interviews, and my colleague and Nathan Mick, they do the technical side of it. And if you've listened to a couple of the ones recently, Nathan actually jumps on with me, and we talk topical things when it comes to turf at the time. And otherwise, we're just we're on the hunt for special and unique guests, and we try and give people out there a better perspective of our industry, very similar to what your wonderful podcast does too. It's great.
Thanks, man. Well, look, one of the reasons why I'm excited, and I wanted to get you on very early on, and the reason is that I think what you guys do, so Lawn Solutions Australia, is you're essentially a network of turf suppliers. Is that right?
Yeah, we're a national network of turf producers, and each one of our members they're individually owned businesses. So they're mostly family turf farms, second, third, I think even fourth generation turf farmers are out there now. And by being members of Lawn Solutions of LSA, they get access to our proprietary turf brands that we do the R&D on to try and get the best turf grasses for the market, and they grow them, sell them, and drop them at the end user.
Yeah, and I think what you guys do, it's not, do you know, what's the sexy part of the industry is the landscape designer who gets this amazing, beautiful thing and that after photo that gets produced. But the nurseries and the lawn, turf farms and what goes on behind the scenes to get those amazing results are often unsung heroes. And that's why I wanted to get someone like yourself to talk about that side of the industry, because I think what you guys do is so highly valuable. There's nothing as cool or as transformational as laying new lawn on a bare space. And it's so satisfying. And some people as well, they will never get their lawn looking as good as the day that they laid it, unfortunately. And so I wanted to talk from that angle on the industry. So thanks for coming on, Joe.
No, great. I've never had anyone describe what we do as heroic before, Luke. So I'm starting to like it even more now. But no, it's not just grass. And the more people learn about this stuff, the more they realise how much is actually involved in the turf production, turf supply industry. So yeah, can't wait to get to jump on and talk about it.
Yeah, and look, if we don't get into this in full, Brenton, who we had from the Aussie Lawn, you and him did a in-person video at one of the turf farms Where's that turf farm again?
That was actually at our head office here at Lawn Solutions. So we're based on a turf farm ourselves. There's a
Yep.
turf business called TurfGo here. So Brenton did a tour of our research facility on one of his videos, and the other video was on a turf farm on the south coast of New South Wales. So if you're not sure, you can check out Brenton's videos. They're a really good insight.
So I would say if you guys like this sort of conversation, jump on their podcast, jump on Brenton's. That's the introduction. Let's get into the main podcast. All right. So talk to me, Joe, about your background. How did you get into turf to start with?
So fortunately or unfortunately, no matter how you look at it, I was sort of born into this industry. My father was a turf farmer, is a turf farmer. My family still run and operate a turf production business on the south coast of New South Wales. And it was through, obviously, a family connection that I started working at Lawn Solutions. My father still works and runs Lawn Solutions. So I got a job pretty easily, I guess you'd say. But no, I've been living and working on a turf farm for my entire life. So we were born, the first house we lived in as kids was on the turf farm, and we've been here pretty well ever since. So that's how I sort of got involved. And I was never really totally into it until sort of the later years of high school, I guess. When you see it every day, you're a kid, you got so much other things going on with sport and mates and whatever else. It wasn't a thing I really grabbed, like a lot of turf farming families out there.
Yeah, okay.
So it sort of came a little bit later, and I was coming to the end of school and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I'd done a couple of days here and there. So I thought I'd get involved, and I started by cutting, delivering and installing lawns for 4 or 5 years until an injury stopped me doing that. So I joined the team at Lawn Solutions then.
So I've straight away, some people would get like bored of the family business, and they want to stretch their legs and try something new. So it's quite interesting that you stayed in it. I guess it shows that you do have a real passion for it. Is that sort of what you would say?
Yeah, definitely. So we're pretty lucky too. Like it's a good industry to work in because it's outdoors. You're working with a really, really good product, and it's so diverse. There's no 2 days that are the same in our industry, which is pretty cool. And I'm lucky enough too. Pretty much all of my family's involved. Well, all my family is involved with the business as well. So both parents, my brother runs the turf production farm. Now, TurfGo in Berry. My sister did work on the farm until had a couple of kids, and she doesn't anymore, and a bunch of cousins and close friends and that sort of thing as well. So it's a strong family business, but it's pretty easy to stay involved when it's a good place to work. You work with good people, and I genuinely love what I do. So it's no difficult decision in order for me to stay at all. It was something I always wanted to do.
That's good. I see from the little bits I see on Instagram, it seems like you're a rugby guy and you're a family guy by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Is that the three loves of your life? Lawn, family, rugby? Or is there anything else there?
It's pretty funny when you go, when you click the search button on your Instagram or you go to your YouTube history and everyone's got different things. Mine's literally footy, things with kids and family and grass. So I always get paid out by my mates and that sort of stuff. But still stupid enough to play rugby league here on South Coast. I'm getting a bit beyond that now, and I've got a beautiful little family that I love hanging out with here too. And obviously I love turf, and I love what I do when it comes to work. So I feel very lucky that I get to combine those three things and enjoy them every day. It's great.
So living around turf your whole life, essentially, was there somebody that you looked up to growing up that you thought this is someone who is, I guess, a bit of a hero, or somebody who you wanted to emulate in some way, or maybe even somebody who didn't necessarily know on a personal level, you might have just seen through TV, or I know the internet was only just sort of starting. We're of a similar age, so you might have had internet stars by then. But who did you look up to growing up?
From a work perspective, I guess you're asking there. Like, I don't know, it was funny. So I always envisaged my career in this industry to be more on the curator side. I'm a mad sports guy, so I always had an obsession with how a footy field looked, or probably more prominently how a cricket pitch played and performed. So I always saw myself as an SCG curator and talking to Ricky Ponting before they tossed the coin about how the wicket was going to play and that sort of thing. That was always my dream. But I guess watching what my father did and still does was always a bit of an inspiration coming into the industry, because I got to see him and the team around him build a business from something that was, a two-man band to something that Lawn Solutions, Sir Walter, and even our turf production business in today. So I guess seeing him do that every day was kind of an inspiration to me. And that sort of helped me continue to be really, really interested and want to continue to build the business that we've got so far.
So your dad's a hero. You're one of your heroes. Your brother is running the business now. You're doing a lot of them. I guess what is your exact role? You're doing a lot of the marketing stuff, I guess.
So my brother doesn't work with me. He runs the turf production business.
That's right.
So we're on the same premises, but we're not too close where he doesn't annoy the crap out of me every day like he used to at home. So we've got a bit of separation there. But my official title is the business development manager. But I suppose my main role is trying to find new places and get our products used in more and more locations that I can. But the other main part of my role is I oversee our research program. I've got a big involvement in bringing in new cultivars into the country, but also managing them, analysing them, and eventually selecting a new cultivar that will bring to market. So I guess those two things are the main parts of my role, and I'm lucky enough with both of these things to travel, Australia and the world. We've got 45 members around the country that I get to visit annually. So I'm traveling quite a bit there, but it's great. They're always fantastic people, and they always live in beautiful parts of Australia. And with our research program, I'm even luckier in some aspects to travel overseas, visit parts of Southeast Asia and also the US plenty of times now. So it's a diverse job, but it's given me so many opportunities I'm so thankful for, and I really do love it.
So with the research, tell me about the research then. Let's hone into this part of subject. We got a good feel for who you are, but what actually goes into bringing a turf into Australia? Some people would say the criticism would be from some people in the general public, not many, but they'll say, "Oh, look, a lot of what goes on with like Sir Walter or Palmetto or Bison Buffalo or Sapphire, it's all marketing, or these different turf varieties, there's not much different in it. They have to get some proprietary thing to get their money, and that's what it's all about." What actually goes into it? Because I would believe, from my understanding, that's not really what it's about. It's not just about getting some money out of it. It's actually about creating something that truly works. But am I understanding this right? What really goes into it? Tell me a bit more about the start of the industry.
Yeah, it's so in depth that people simply don't understand it. And it is I guess a bit of a misconception in not so much the general public, but the general turf public, I guess you say, people that have some interest in lawns and the online communities that we see out there now, which are fantastic. That misconception often gets chucked around that, hey, this is all marketing, every grass is the same, don't worry about it. But once you see the other side of it, and the money and the time and the brains that get invested into breeding new turf grass varieties, it's so impressive. And I guess where we fit in is no one turf farm or turf business can do this on their own. The cost, the time, the sheer management involved with bringing new turf grasses to market is too much. So the benefit of Lawn Solutions is these 45 LSA members from around the country can pull their resources together and attack it that way. So what we do when it comes to turf grass breeding itself, there are turf grass breeders in Australia who do and have done a wonderful job for many years, but it's not at the level that it is in the US. The level and the money and the staff they put into breeding turf grasses in the US is 100-fold of what it is in Australia.
Right.
So what we do instead of trying to do it ourselves here is we have built up partnerships over the last decade or so with turf breeding institutions in the US, which are universities. The University of Georgia and Texas A&M are the two biggest ones that we work with. There's also a large private turf grass breed over there called Blade Runner Farms. So we've built these relationships with these turf breeders, and through these relationships, we get access to the material that they breed. I'll go into the breeding side of it a little bit later if that suits. But once they breed a material and it suits our criteria, we then get the option through our relationship to import that into Australia. What happens then is it goes through our quarantine process, which is lengthy, expensive, and painful. But you got to go through the front door when you're bringing things like turf into Australia. It's not a matter of wrapping in your socks and throwing it in your suitcase. You got to do the right thing. So we import anywhere from 18 to 40 different cultivars at a time. It just depends how it works, and we do this every couple of years. And they come through in Australia and looks a bit suspect, actually. They come through in little Ziploc bags. They come through the country importing a bit of grass, and we don't see them. They go straight into the Australian quarantine facility, which is based in Victoria. And what happens then is they stay there for about anywhere from 9 months to 2 years. And they boil them, they spray them with pesticides, they treat them with all things that they've got to treat them with to try and make sure there's no pathogens or anything nasty coming into the country. And at the end of that process, they get released to us, and they get released to us in an 8-inch garden pot. So through all the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've invested and all the time that we've wasted, you want to make sure the irrigation gets on that pretty quick, because you've only got an 8-inch pot to work with. And then the process from there is you've got 36 grasses that you've got to propagate and analyze. But you've got to propagate them not just in one location. You've got to do it so it encompasses all climates around Australia, and you watch and you see and you make changes and you try and narrow that selection process down to eventually bring a grass to market. And turf grass from sprig to plant takes a long time to grow and germinate, so it can be a pretty lengthy process.
So here's 2 real world questions I've got to ask you. One, how much does it actually cost? Like, you're saying hundreds of thousands, but like, can you give me a number of not exact number? I'm sure you probably don't have your accounts in front of you, but like, say to bring in the new Zoysia you've just released, Australis is called.
Yes.
What's a ballpark figure to get that single pot just in here?
Sure. So, you probably can imagine, it's hard to put an exact number on it, but to give you an idea, like the University of Georgia, who were behind the breeding of this particular cultivar, they invest, I think it's $5 million US annually goes into their breeding program. They've got Dr. Brian Schwartz, and they've got a couple of other associate professors and many junior admin professors, whatever they call them, underneath that. So their program is astronomical, the size of it there. And that's just one institution. Once they find the grass, actually importing into Australia is an incredibly expensive process too. So through quarantine, it's anywhere between $2,000 and $4,000 per cultivar, per variety, to get into quarantine. And when you import sort of between 18 and 40, that can get quite expensive as well. And then once you bring it out of quarantine, you then have to propagate it. So there are propagation costs associated with that. You've got to propagate it in several different parts around Australia. So it's not just in the one location. And then once you eventually like a grass and bring it to market, there's the certification and genetic purity cost involved as well. This is a common one people don't often understand, is with these new grasses, because don't forget, let's take TifTuf or Australis, for example. There's been a lot of time and money spent on these grasses to breed them to that exact breed that they are. So you get these wonderful benefits. Grasses cross-pollinate and open-pollinate all the time. So ensuring the grass that comes out of quarantine is the same grass that gets planted on that turf farm in WA is a pretty extensive process. So there's so many indirect costs associated with doing it as well. But I'd say in the realms of a couple of $100,000 just to get the grasses into Australia planted and growing, but then to breed them is a whole different thing. That's why we get Americans to do that stuff.
That's like at least 10 Zinger boxes, like
there's a lot of Zinger boxes in that. I love how
that's all I can think of money wise, right? It's like, how many Zinger boxes does it cost me to get?
You use the same comparative tool as me. I like that. Yeah.
I think it's how many beers, Zinger boxes, a couple of Pepsi Maxes.
Yeah. There's a lot of wicked wings in bringing this into Australia. Don't worry.
So that was the first thing I wanted. So a couple of $100,000 just to get in. You said $4,000 on the higher end for a single sample. Is that what you said? Just for the quarantine. and you
that
might
could be
bringing
horribly
40.
wrong, but I think it's about that.
It could be horribly wrong. It could be at
Don't,
least 50 Zeo boxes.
don't quote me on numbers, please. But no, that's in the ballpark.
Okay. I don't think we have I don't think the government is matching this podcast with what your accountant's been putting through the books. All right. So don't worry about that.
There'll be a knock at the door soon. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, the police will become for you. No, so so it's insanely expensive, but has somebody ever screwed up and killed the cultivar?
Oh, we've had a couple of scary moments. One of our major cultivars that we've brought out, it was very, very close to being a forgotten poor little soul for a while there, and actually got left in the part of the hothouse when we first. I remember it was the 1st of December in 2013, I think it was. First time we've ever imported grasses into Australia, and we set them all up. We had this beautiful brand new glass house. None of us knew at all what we were doing, and we set our irrigation up. And then it was only after the weekend we noticed that the irrigation wasn't quite getting to every corner of the hothouse, and lucky we saw it when we did. If it went another day or two, it would have died and we would have had to start again. And that ended up being a very popular grass that we've released since. So,
which variety is that?
It was TifTuf, and it was a testament. It was a testament to its drought tolerance. Don't worry, that thing hung on for dear life.
It was intentional. You were just proving the concept, really, weren't you?
We're just proving the concept. That's all. It was science, we said. It was just basic science. But no, it's so easy to happen. Like we do it now. We've just imported some buffalo grasses here, and I remember, stressing the day we planted them, going, if the irrigation timer doesn't work or the batteries are out or something like that, then we're in all sorts of money. But no, we've got through so far. We'll keep going.
Yeah, I can imagine those stresses, and I mean, it's just business. It's like business, a career, things like that people have, just trying to make that stuff work. It's real world stuff. What's the most embarrassing mistake or funniest moment, that you've had in your role here at Lawn Solutions? Have you done something like that where you were the one that almost? You knocked over a perfect sample. You sprayed the wrong herbicide. I don't know what your role actually entails, but what sort of mistakes have you made?
Well, that was probably it. The one before, because that was
okay.
that was
you,
job.
Was it? Okay, all right. And they still trust you.
They still trust you somehow. Yeah. That's it's hard to sack you, son. So it's a pretty good spot to be. No, that was probably it. Like that could have been pretty bad. If that actually sort of went the way it did. But just make sure when you import these wonderful turf grasses that you put the water on them when you get them here, because they're sitting in a black pot and they heat up super quick. But that was probably it. We've had a bunch of different stuff ups. The main funny stories, I guess, come from when you go to the other side of the world and talk to these breeding institutions and these Americans over there, because they're all Southerners and they're so different to us. They are the nicest, most polite, gentle people in the world, the Southerners from the US. They get a bit of a bad rap sometimes, but they're great people. And we've had some funny stories over there. It's a totally different part of the world. They can't understand a word we're saying because they say about one word every 5 seconds and we're about 50. So it can get a bit far-fetched. But no, when it comes to stuffing up, it happens regularly, but that was about as bad as it got so far, thank God.
I got a funny story from last week. I like throwing myself under the bus because I think once something happens on Instagram and stuff, we're all guilty of this because Instagram is a marketing tool, really. So, but you put out your most beautiful, most amazing stuff, and everyone's like, "Oh, you guys know what you're doing," or "Look at it," and we don't talk about our mistakes. And I think that's some of the best stories. But I had this thing the other day. I was spraying. I was down to liquid fertilize, an oval. I showed you a video of the oval before we started. Yeah. And it's the only oval we do. And so I haven't invested. Most of what we do is sort of smaller stuff. So I haven't invested in a massive boom to liquid fertilize this oval. And so it takes me about an hour or so to do it usually. I don't mind because it's just one job. And anyway, so I'm driving the machine. I've got a mower that I've hooked everything onto. We've made it like a pro setup, everything. But I've got to clip the pump, 12-volt pump, to my battery on my mower. And I'm driving. I haven't clicked the pump in because I don't want to accidentally press the button and spray it before I get there. And I don't realize, but my clips have fallen off the sprayer and fallen down, and they're now touching the muffler. And my positive has melted. And so I get to go clip them in. My negative's fine, and my positive is just a bare wire. And I'm like, oh, no. So to give a bit more context, this is June, if someone's listening at a different time of year, or end of May when I did this. So it gets dark quick, right? I have to spray outside of school hours because the kids are playing on the school, so it's late in the afternoon. And I've got to try and attach my sprayer to my battery. And I'm at the school. All I've got is a big, fat, adjustable spanner, right? And if you guys have ever played with the positive and metal and a big spanner, there's sparks flying everywhere because if you touch the positive and the frame, so I'm like jumping every 5 seconds, almost going to zap myself, having a heart attack, trying to rush to get this done because I've got to finish this in an hour, right? And I'm running out of light. It's it's annoying, stressful. Finally, I get the bolt undone enough, shove the wire in there, slam it back in. If I'm describing this, if you guys know battery terminals, you know what I'm talking about. Simply clamp on the other side, get going. I've lost too much time. And the problem is I just know I can't get it done because I'm not using a spray marker or anything. I'm just going off my wheel tracks. And I've done it before, been fine going off the wheel tracks, no problem. I get halfway through, I'm starting to really struggle to see my wheel tracks. I'm like, oh no. And if
what
you
are
guys
you spraying?
I'm using spraying liquid fertilizer, right?
Just liquid ferts, right? Yeah.
So iron, manganese, and nitrogen, basically. And so I'm stressing out a little bit because I'm like, what should I do? Should I stop and just have half a green oval, right? And literally half a green oval, or should I keep going and guess? And I kept going and I guessed and I rocked up, I packed it all away and I was like, I think I've done okay. Like I'm just going off feel now, like doing 180s, hoping for the best. I woke up the next morning, half the oval is perfect and half the oval looks like a zebra. I had to message the principal straight away and I was like, I ran out of light. Here's the story. I told him the whole thing. And so it's so funny. I was like, I will literally finish this off this afternoon. Don't worry about it. But man, that was last week. So we've all made these funny stories.
At least it wasn't glyphosate or something like that. Liquid fert, you can get away. You've probably done the Roundup footprints before, I'd imagine, haven't you? Where you spray somewhere and walk it and walk over something you haven't.
I'm pretty good with Roundup. My tip is for this is people have got lots of they got a battery knapsacks. Battery knapsacks for lawn applications really good, but I still love the handheld power, like manual power, because when you're spraying Roundup, you can put your pressure right down, right? Basically, hardly any flow rate when it's windy, and just be good with that. But no, I haven't made many mistakes with that stuff. But I mean, I made just about every other mistake on the side. So never a glyphosate thing. I did spray that oval once with a herbicide to get rid of the ryegrass that was growing through, and I also did it by sight because I didn't want to color in patches. I was only doing patches of the oval, and there were some nice strips that didn't end up dying, which obviously I missed. But anyways, you just get back and get them later. So I haven't done a full-on kill like that. But yeah, anyways, that was still pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. How you learn, I reckon.
Well, I wish I didn't learn that way because probably it would be better for my reputation. But look, anyways, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not really pushing yourself, I don't think. You got to try new things every now and then.
100%. Yeah.
What's the hardest part? I mean, here's the thing. Like we talked about this before. Some people, when they lay their lawn, it's the most beautiful their lawn is ever going to be, right? Hopefully the people listening to this podcast can make it better and obviously more established and at least keep it to that standard, right? So these turf farms, it's amazing what they're doing to deliver something that looks that good and then cut it, 2 centimeters under the surface or something like that, have it roll out and it looks so smick. It wasn't always like that. But what is the hardest part, the most underrated part that maybe us, me and other people listening to this might not understand, that it makes it so difficult to get those results?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and the reason turf looks so good the first day of late all the time is people have got to remember it's coming from a full sun, nowhere environment. It's getting cared for to within, to perfect levels. So it
Yep.
is really hard for people to emulate that in a shaded backyard with kids' pets. Your lawn's to have fun on. Your lawn's not to have a look in 10 out of 10, 365, 24/7. It'd be nice, but your lawn's to enjoy. So don't fret when it doesn't look exactly like it does off the turf farm. But from a production point of view, the most difficult things to manage is transport and the perishable nature of turf by far. So
Right.
if you're harvesting and delivering a product and you need it looking 10 out of 10 on delivery, otherwise you get a phone call straight away. Turf can perish in 8 to 12 hours in summer. It can overheat, it can smell, it can discolor super, super quickly. So one of the most difficult things isn't actually in the growing, it's in the transporting with certain varieties over summer is trying to get your harvesting techniques right so the product's fresh at the customer's door. So what a lot of turf farms do now is they work night shift. Essentially, their harvest crews start at midnight or 2 in the morning, and they harvest. This is mainly in summer, and they harvest from midnight through to 6 a.m. They load the trucks. The turf gets delivered that day. There's also other techniques like ice. A lot of turf farms use bags of ice now, or ice related. Or empty bags of ice onto their pallets to try and keep the core temperature down. They leave a little gap when they stack the turf in the middle. There's a bunch of different ways they do it, but that's probably one of the more difficult things is the perishable nature of our product. And people can get frustrated when the turf turns up in summer and it might, they might be at work, so they might be able to lay it to the afternoon and it's quite yellow on arrival. It's a difficult thing to manage. Otherwise, on farm, it's probably the sheer amount of turf that you have, and you have to have looking good all the time. It can be a difficult thing because you're at the whims of nature. I know the last 18 months, 2 years have been very difficult in the East Coast with flooding. For example, you can have a farm full of pristine grass ready to harvest and sell, and like the people experienced in the Windsor area of New South Wales, you can have a flood and your whole crop can be decimated. You can have an armyworm attack and your whole crop can be decimated. You can have a sprinkler breakdown. You can have anything happen. And it's a very difficult thing to do. It's not just a matter of building more in the factory. You've got to wait for this stuff to grow and repair. So I guess being at the whims of nature is probably the most difficult thing when it comes to producing turf.
That 2 a.m. start time, like that surely... Because one of the things about the whole industry, and you talked about this with Brenton on your podcast, I've talked about it with Ben and a few other people, is I think the industry is, it's so hard to get the award rate right because there's so many different aspects to the industry. So some people will just be shoveling mulch and some people will be breaking their backside every single day, slogging to get amazing results. And I mean, it must be hard to find people who can work those sorts of hours and keep turf at a competitive price. And, it must be a whole side of that because that would be tough work, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah, it's like any business. Every business has their challenges with turf. Look, fortunately, a lot of that work now is in an air-conditioned cab. That's quite comfortable. Yeah. It's not the back-breaking task that it once was. The hardest bit now is probably installing turf when it comes to actual physical labor. The rest of the work now is quite mechanical, and we're fortunate enough that that's the case. So, my father's generation, sort of around that, turf production was a back-breaking job.
Yes.
But now through technological advancements and the way harvesters are and tractors are set up now, it's not a physically demanding job. But on these bigger farms with sheer volume and the perishable nature of turf, it can be a long day at weird hours for a lot of people. But that's part of the game. Fortunately or unfortunately, you just you get on with it.
Hey everyone, I need a little bit of help from you. Just a small little request. We're in the process of having some conversations with some great brands about sponsoring the podcast. And I need one little thing from you to help with our engagement and to help with boosting a little bit of numbers. Could you please just pause the episode right now and share your favorite podcast episode that we've done with a friend? Just send it to anybody, share it out. Hopefully we get some views. If everyone who's listening to this, and yes, I mean you, if you're listening to this right now, I mean you, could you please pause the podcast, click the share button, send it to someone, spam your friends with it, get the word out there. The more people we get, the more attractive we look to brands. The more attractive we are to brands and the sponsors that we can get, then the more of these episodes we can do. If you don't know this, it's taken me about 8 or 9 hours to do one podcast. And so doing a couple of weeks, it really adds up. So we need that financial support. You can share. Did I mention sharing? Could you please share? Did I say we should share? Anyways, thanks for your support, guys. let's get back into the podcast. So I was just going to try and find a photo of an AFL stadium so we could talk about the lawn. But what's come up is that I called rugby league rugby, and Joe's mortally offended at me. What have I done, Joe? I don't even know. I'm from WA, so I'm just clueless.
It annoys the crap out of me when people call rugby league rugby. They're two totally different games. I'm not a rugby guy at all. Rugby Union is just a game that I cannot seem to like, and this is going to upset some people, but I'm a league guy through and through, so I'll cop AFL over rugby.
So what they are so similar to a casual guy like me. What am I missing?
No, they're not. These Union's a game where they just kick it to each other the entire time, fullback to fullback, and they kick penalty goals. They don't score any tries. There's 15 blokes that just pile on top of each other and try and sort it out. It's an absolute mess. There's no flow to it. Rugby league's the perfect game. Right. It's beautiful to watch. It's played by the smattest people in the world, pure athletes.
The smartest people in the world?
I'll
just be fair. I don't think the smartest people in the world are probably not playing any sport. Let's be honest, right? Especially not one where there's head collisions.
I'm just having a dig. No, it's just I knew where you were going. You said it once before, but I didn't pull you up on it. You said rugby, and it infuriates me. But I let it slide. I didn't let it slide the second time.
Yeah, man, I turned off. I said, we're not recording. I'll get my little thing ready, and then the full rage came out. You guys should have seen it. It was.
Yeah, no, I kept it PG when you said we're back on the air.
Yeah, for the integrity of the brand, I won't release the real recording. No, I'm joking. It was just what you heard then. I just thought it'd be interesting. So you love. So what do I have to call it? Just to be clear.
Just league or rugby league?
Okay, league. I'll just call it league.
NRL league, rugby league, just not rugby.
And who's your team?
Well, I'm a Dragons fan, which is really, really depressing at the moment. It's like being a West Coast Eagles fan. Yeah, very similar.
Is it? Oh, I know about that.
yeah, we're in the same boat. Yeah.
Oh, it's painful. But I have to say, the West Coast Eagles shouldn't, to be fair, they're a pretty successful team. So you've got to take some periods of, bad weather. You can't be a fair weather supporter all the time.
Yeah, that's right. I wish the Dragons had a little bit more success, but 2010, mate, we won the comp in 2010, so I'm still riding on that.
When was the last time before 2010?
The 80s, I believe.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, I think it was the 80s. Yeah, it was before my time anyway.
Well, I think the Eagles have won it, four times since the 90s.
Yeah, 2000.
They're not that old.
They were good. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Eagles, we're talking about sport now. I mean, this is just going to naturally happen with the two of us. But the thing about the Eagles is and Dockers to a degree, we have this, because WA loves AFL, right? And WA is so far away, we get this disadvantage where you're always flying all the time. But the advantage that you can get sometimes is that people get homesick and they want to come back to their family. And so you do find that over time, the WA teams can, even though there's a draft, they can sometimes steal some of the better players from the other teams just because they're homesick and they want to spend more time in WA. And so we can get a bit of an advantage with that sometimes. So I'm not saying it's not necessarily just that, we're the best team in the world or anything like that. It could just be, there's a few, structural things in our favour.
It'll turn around. How's the other mob going? How's Freo going this year? They're all right, aren't they?
Oh, Freo are doing pretty good. I haven't actually checked. Let me have a look. I haven't checked after this weekend. Freo ladder. I don't mind having these sorts of detours on the podcast. This is real world. They're 10th. They're 10th. Okay. But if you look at, I think they, but they're one win off 5th. Because early in the season,
it's a long 24. Same as they are. Yeah, it's close. Same as NRL, close all the way through. They're
on 24 points and 5th is on 28. So it's okay. That's just how it is at this time. So at least they're competitive. West Coast are on 4 points from 12. That's one win in 12 games.
Yeah, it's 4 points a win, isn't it? So
I think the average losing margin is about 6 or 7 billion. I think that's what they're currently losing by.
Well, I looked at something the other day and I saw they were playing Collingwood, and Collingwood were $1.01 and they were $19 or something. So I figured they mustn't be going too crash hot.
No, well, Collingwood's the best team at the moment. So
okay,
although we were competitive for about 3 quarters, and that's all you can expect right now. Okay, let's talk about Lorne, all right? I'll forgive you this time, but if it ever happens again, no. Okay, let me put this on the screen. I mean, this is an AFL stadium, so we haven't strayed too far. What we've got here, for those who are listening, you may be aware of a bit of the controversy. I mean, we talked a little bit about this with Lenny Lawler, but there's a lot of concerts. Ed Sheeran really had some massive concerts at these great big stadiums, and it's really affected the playing surface of the grass. And there was this post on WA Lawn Addicts, which I made a joke on because somebody said, look how bad this grass looks after Ed Sheeran. How bad will it be after Coldplay? And I said, it'll probably be all yellow. And I got a few good likes from that one. I think I got like 100 likes on that joke, so I'm proud of that one. But what's going on here, Joe? This isn't necessarily your Lawn Solutions brand of turf or anything like that. We're not trying to knock any turf supply here. I just want to get behind the scenes from somebody who's involved in the industry. How difficult is it to really get a surface pristine in these sorts of conditions, whether or not it's one of your types of turf or somebody else's? What's behind the scenes going on here, do you think?
The cultivar is pretty, to a certain extent irrelevant with this. I feel sorry for our curators of stadiums like this, because they get hammered over social media, and it's a good time to ask this question because we had a pretty similar thing happen in rugby league over in the East just recently with Suncorp
Not
Stadium.
rugby league.
Not rugby. Might have happened in rugby, but you don't hear about it because no one watches it. So, but rugby league with Suncorp Stadium. So I was actually there at the turf farm that supplies the turf to Suncorp Stadium on the day where they'll cut and deliver the turf. So the same thing happened. They were having a bunch of concerts. They were having so many games. Like They had rugby, they had soccer, they had league, they had everything. On Suncorp Stadium. I'm guessing this stadium's no different. They've probably got a bunch of different sports happening on all the time. And they throw concerts into the mix and they expect a 10 out of 10 surface all the time. The issue with concerts is they pretty much have to rip up and relay the turf after every single concert, because you have so many people there. You've got stages on it. You've got so much wear and tear. And what happens is, the way they harvest these turf for stadiums is incredible. It's not like the turf that turns up at your door when you order 50 meters of buffalo for your back lawn. These things it's a ready to play system. So it comes out, they roll it out, they knit it all together, and they can play footy on it a couple of days after they lay it. It's ridiculous how good this system is, but it does put a lot of pressure on the surface, particularly with games of rugby or rugby league. When they're packing scrums and they're really chewing up the surface. And this was the problem with Suncorp, is they had a Dell concert or whatever it was at the time. They remove all the grass, they relay it, and this ready-to-play system. Then 8 days later, they've got a thing called Magic Round on it, where they play every game of NRL on the round over this one surface. And people ring up. They go on social media and they whinge and they go, the ground manager should be sacked, blah, 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 blah. They have absolutely no idea the pressure and the impossible situation these guys face sometimes. And I feel really sorry for them. And the situation's probably the same here. They've probably just relayed a bunch of turf at this stadium. You can see the lines from the maxi rolls, is what I think I'm looking at. And it's a path to nowhere for these poor guys. And they've probably got 4 games of footy on it, plus training, plus school footy, plus whatever. On this surface on grass that's been down for 8 days, so it's an impossible task. I hate how they get belted in the media. Annoys me. Yeah,
that's why I want to bring it up. How deep are those? Because the maxi rolls, I've seen them on the back of a truck. I've never seen them installed. I mean, describe to the people just listening how big they are and how deep are they? Because that's the thing I wanted to get at. How much root is actually on this lawn?
So it depends on the system. So there's a couple of different types. So the main type, I don't know if it's the main type, but it's the type I saw getting harvested in Brisbane for Suncorp that day. It's people that actually do this are probably going to be sitting there going, "This guy's so wrong." But I'm just going to go from sort of what I saw. But
well, you know more than me, so I can't question you. So you'll get away with it on this part of the podcast.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's about the stuff that I saw was about 75 to 100 mil thick, I'm going to say. But it wasn't just normal soil. It's reinforced soil that has little fibers in it to help it hold together. Now, I don't know if you ever poured concrete before. They do it in concrete as well. It's called fibercrete. They put little fibers in it so you don't have to form up properly for little garden sheds and stuff, and it holds it together. Sure. The same concepts with soil. They put these little fibers in there, and it really gives that soil, a lot of structure and a lot of strength. And they plant the grass on farm into this soil, and they grow it and they maintain it to stadium quality. And when it comes to harvest, they use a special harvester that harvests the turf and 75 to 100 mil of this reinforced soil. So it's a big, thick mat, and it goes on trucks, and it's probably only, 10 square meters a roll or something like that, where a normal maxi is 25 to 30. They lay it out, they pull it together, and it's ready to go. The other way they do it is what's called a hybrid turf system, where it's actually synthetic turf fibers at the base of the turf, and they plant natural turf into the synthetic fibers. And it's a really popular choice now around Australia, and it's a great surface. So you don't actually see the synthetic turf. All you see is natural turf, but the synthetic turf gives it the strength. And also, if you do wear a patch in the natural turf, you're not exposing dirt, you're exposing green synthetic fibers. So from a turf of TV perspective, it doesn't look patchy, even though it may be. But the synthetic base really, really gives it its strength. So they're the two main methods they'll do sports turf these days, described in an incredibly layman's term from someone who's only sort of looked at it far. So there's people probably shaking their fists at the moment. But that's about how it works.
Like I said, I can't question you, so you sound like a genius to me.
It's all correct. Yeah.
Yeah. They never question me. I did want to say as well, when we look at the there's a whole different way of doing things across the country, right? And so there's even different ways of doing things within, like you're saying, the different types of roles, different types of soil, holding it all together. What are the differences that you see? I mean, because you said you've been everywhere. Are there things that are happening between different turf farms, even in the country or across to America, that you look at and you're just like, that's unique, that's weird, why are you doing that? Or like, wow, that's a really good idea, why aren't we doing that? Like unique things. Like I was just thinking then, like we cut our turf so short, and you're like, as in when you get your roll on for your residential job, it's 2 centimeters or something like that. I wonder if there's way. I was just thinking 7 centimeters would be so good for establishing a new turf, but then the cost be and all these things are going through our minds. So I wonder if there's anything like that people are doing that you think, oh, that's just amazing, or that's stupid, or what's interesting going around the country.
Turf farmers put as little dirt as they possibly can on their turf they put enough on it to make it establish and be really, really healthy, but freight would absolutely crush them if they were trying to put too much dirt on it, because dirt's really, really heavy. But look, I visited a bunch of turf farms in February this year in the southeastern United States, and it's funny how similar the industry is across the board.
Interesting.
Like everyone's got their little niche things they do, like the turf farm A in Sydney won't tell turf farm B in Sydney how he grows his grass or how he treats his weeds or how he pre-emerges or whatever, because they're secrets. But in general, they're all very similar. Where we differ mainly is the sports turf surfaces in the US now are crazy. So the stadium that the Super Bowl was on, the new Vegas stadium, all these new ones, these new stadiums, what they do is the turf is grown and maintained outside the stadium in a full sun environment. They put them on these conveyors. I don't know if you've seen it, and they roll. I've
seen the one at Arizona. I'll try and find the Arizona. What's the stadium called? Stadium Turf. I'll try and find a photo while you're talking of it. Yeah.
So the biggest challenge we face in Stadia here, when I say we, I'm not in the stadium industry, but I'll say we because we're all tough. So the biggest challenge a curator faces, other than what we spoke about before, is like you look at Suncorp Stadium and these NRL grounds, even the AFL grounds, there is so much shade pressure on these grounds. Like they're big stadiums, like Suncorp's got if you look at it from above, it's a tiny little rectangle of sun that gets allowed in. So you think of a backyard, the worst thing that can happen is shade and wear. These stadiums have shade and wear to the extreme. So what they do in the US is they take the whole grass surface out on a conveyor, and they treat it and they look after it and they maintain it in a full sun environment, pretty much like looking after turf on a turf farm. And then when it comes to game day, they wheel these surfaces back in. And what they do when they get damaged on the field during play, they just take them straight back out. They repair them in full sun in the most perfect environment, and they put them back in. And that is just, it's a whole other world that we don't have in Australia at the moment. So the biggest difference between the two would probably come in the stadium industry. The turf farming, we're pretty advanced in Australia in a lot of ways compared to the US. The reason we've been forced to in the southern US, I want to be careful how I say this, but they still have access to cheap labor, labor that comes from over the border. So they still do a lot of tasks manually on the turf farms that I've been to in the southern areas.
Interesting.
Because they have they still use a lot of manual stackers, these big farms over there, which is most turf farms in Australia now are auto harvesters. But because of their access to, I'm going to say cheaper labor over there, it's cost effective for them to do it. We don't have that in Australia. So we're probably, in a lot of ways, we're more advanced than our US counterparts when it comes to turf production.
Okay, that surprises me because, as you said before, and I've heard this many times from different people, that what's going on in America is just, a different world sometimes than what we're necessarily doing. But that's interesting. This is Arizona. For those listening and you're not watching, let me explain this to you. It's basically, there's you can see the outside of a football stadium. It's got an enclosed roof, and then there's this entire football field. Basically, it looks like it's in the car park. It's not in the car park, but it looks like it's just been dragged out into the car park on a mat or something like that. But they've got these massive rollers. I've seen it. Have a look at this. Just look up Arizona Stadium turf, and that's what comes up. It's pretty crazy, hey? And I think they've got something like this at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Are you aware of this? They've got there.
I'm a mad Arsenal fan, so I hate Tottenham. But they do have they do have something similar. The new stadium they built in Las Vegas for the Vegas Raiders, it's something similar as well. The closest thing we have, Bank West has got something really unusual. Now, again, I'm not gonna. I've been there and they explained it, but it was a couple of years ago. And again, this is probably going to be horribly wrong. So people at Bank West will be, but they don't have this system, but they've got a system underneath their surface where they can put heat into the roots of the grass through these big vents or big vats. And they can draw moisture out of the surface. They can add moisture to the surface, and they can blow basically hot air into the roots of the grass to keep it growing. Yeah. But what a lot of stadiums in Australia are doing around the world is they have glow lights. I don't know if you've seen them. They're these big they're on tracks or wheels, and they basically infrared lights or UV lights that pump light into these stadiums. But other than that, the US what you saw in that photo there it's incredible what they're doing in stadium now.
Well, I'll try to find. Here's a good photo of the grow lights, because this is something that has actually been coming up on certain. And this is on the Tottenham page, so you're going to have to forgive me for picking this photo. For those who don't know, Tottenham and Arsenal are mad enemies. Now, you must be pretty disappointed in your season. Then you had a chance to win it, and you threw it all away.
You said before we spoke, is there any controversial topics you don't want to talk about? And Arsenal season is one of them. So if we can just leave it there.
I gave you an opportunity. You said we can talk about anything. So here we are.
So many rubbish years, and they finally were good, and they bottled it in the end. But anyway, it's all good.
I should be able to just swing across to this photo here. There we go. Look, I'm getting better at the technology. For those who listen every week, I stuff something up. So, we're doing all right. But if you guys, basically, they've got massive framework basically on wheels, long iron girders and huge lights. I think they're LED, aren't they?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's one in STRI in Queensland. We do a lot of work with STRI, and they have a glow light thing there. And I think they're all LED lights there. It's so unique.
What's STRI? Because if I'm honest, it sounds like a disease I don't want to get.
Yeah, you get rid of the R and it's a disease you don't want to get. But
that's it.
It's a Sports Turf Research Institute. So they're a UK-based company, but they're worldwide, and they do all the work. Look, they're probably responsible for this stadium. They do a lot of the top Premier League grounds. They do Wimbledon tennis. They do Lords. They do everything, and they've got a department in Australia that conducts a lot of our research programs for us. So that's where I've seen these before.
Well, yeah, I think they've got some. I've seen some photos of them at Optus as well, which they only really use on the northern side, which gets the southern shade.
Yeah.
And
Most big stadiums in Australia have them now.
Yeah, Optus is fairly open though.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's got a roof, but it's not like Marvel or Suncorp that you were talking about before. And I guess these British ones they haven't got a whole lot of light to start with anyway.
No.
Especially in the cooler months. So look, that's a bunch of fascinating stuff right there.
It's so cool. Yeah.
It is. I love it. I'm hoping. I've been trying to. We've got someone teed up who has actually worked at Wembley, and has been working at Wembley this season.
Yeah.
And that's a massive 100,000 people stadium over in England. I don't think they're permanently there, but in March they have a bunch of games on, so they need extra help. They get people to come in. So that's somebody who we've teed up for. It's just so hard to do a podcast with somebody in England when the time difference is so we've
get up early. Yeah.
Oh yeah, someone's got to. It's going to be tough for somebody. Yeah, we just got to make it work. So we'll bring all that sort of stuff up when it comes back to let's get back to Lawn Solutions for a little bit, and because I got a lot of questions about the turf stuff I want to ask. Hey, you know how early in the episode I asked you to share the podcast? Well, you didn't share it, did you? Look, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. So, look, here's another opportunity then to share it. You can do that right now. Yeah. Just start talking about sharing it and how that would help us out. Anyways, if you did share it, then we could be friends. Thank you very much. Anyways, look, I'm just having a laugh. We will eventually have these proper ads here. You know, people who are really helpful. But we're waiting for the right people to come along. In the meantime, you could just share it. Anyways, sorry, I'll stop spamming you. Let's get back into the podcast. So, Joe, let's get into a little bit more of what you guys do, Lawn Solutions-wise. Stop talking about league, which I should never call rugby again in my life, and stadiums and stuff. But so one of the things that you guys, when you're doing your research, which is part of what you do, you're bringing these tiny little samples. So you've got a single pot of TifTuf, and you have to grow out hectares and hectares and hectares and hectares and hectares of that stuff, right? That takes a lot of time, right?
Yes, and this is the incredibly, I guess frustrating part of what we do. So we've got to do this. Initially, we don't know what the best grass is, right? So we have data in the US, but there isn't a climate in Australia that directly mimics the US. So it's so different. Like their extremes are far more extreme than ours. Like I know Georgia, where these grasses are bred, it gets 40 hot and dry in summer and it gets -10 in winter. Like there's nowhere in Australia that really, really replicates that. So we have to do our own analysis. So with these plots, it's not only the propagation of them, it's the different locations that we have to propagate them in, because we don't like releasing a grass unless you can grow it in Broome and Victoria. Like you want to be able to grow it Australia wide, and you've got to do it for, like I said, you don't know what the best one is now, so you've got to do it for all of them. So you can get 3-4 years down the track and you can narrow it from 30 to 5, and you can have these 5 beautiful grasses that you love. You can propagate them to a 500-meter area, because at first it's growing speed, it's quality, and it's color, more or less, is what you're looking at. Seed production, thatch production, other things are important, but it's got to look good. It's got to have a nice color, and it's got to grow in at a reasonable rate so it's viable to produce. Let's stop there on a second, because what people won't understand is a lot of the expense with different turf varieties is not necessarily that one is better than the other, so it's more expensive. It's that sometimes it's just slower growing, so it takes more time and thus costs more to produce. Is that right? Yeah, it is to a point. Yes, this is agriculture. We got to remember too. So you've only got X amount of ground, and if a crop's taking longer to produce, that will generally be reflective in the price of the product. Mind you, the products that are, as a rule, the ones that are more expensive generally are better products than what they are. But that does factor into it slightly. But
I mean more of a comparison between, so like you might find that on average buffalo is more expensive than on average coot.
Yeah, and Zoysia usually, again.
Yeah, exactly. Because buffalo and Zoysia, they may be the best. They may be the best option for you, but they may not be the best option for you just because they're more expensive. it's just different. There's different things that go into it. So what you were getting at there was that you've got to look into the growth rate, because if it's so slow, you may have to charge 50% more than a different, say, type of the same variety, different type of Zoysia or a different type of cooch. And it just may not be worthwhile for you to even put it into market, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it can get to the point where it's just too slow for you to even bring to market. It could be the best looking, best performing turf grass, but if it's a slow grower and the turf farm can't produce it viably or economically or efficiently or whatever, it just doesn't make it. It's a fact of what we do. But generally, if they're slow to produce, they're slow to recover. So they can be issues in the marketplace as well. So it's you can't really get one without the other. But like I said, the frustrating thing is you could have 5 grasses and 3 of them you love and they're beautiful. You could put them out onto a larger plot. You could spray them with a common herbicide and it could hurt them. You could go to harvest them and they couldn't roll up. They might struggle through a winter. You don't know. So you can get 3, 4, 5 years down the track and have your eye on this one, and all of a sudden it's not a commercially viable cultivar. So you got to rip it up and start again. So it can be a frustrating thing. So we generally try not to have our eye on one. We generally try to cast a nice wide net and pick our 5 favorite to then propagate further. And we have a pretty strict scoring and monitoring system. And once we get sort of 12, 18 months into it and we've seen a winter or two, we can really start to narrow this field down. And then our job gets a little bit easier because you're only replicating trial work on 5 cultivars, not 40. So that's sort of where we get to.
So let me ask you this then. Is there any variety that you yourself, Joe, were looking at going, man, I love this one. This is so good. And yet you just knew you couldn't choose that. You couldn't have that be your, like for some reason it just wasn't going to work. And you you sort of wish you could have made it work, something out there that you just couldn't bring to market like that?
Look, there's been a couple of instances, mainly with Zoysia grass, because Zoysia matrellas are such slow-growing grasses, and the problem is they look so good. They've got this beautiful fine leaf, and particularly in the right climate, they are just magic. Like some of these grasses, Zoysia grass that we get to see when we went to Southeast Asia the other year, it is the best grass you've ever seen in your life, bar none. But we get them into our climate, and they are just so slow. People that have Segrange. Segrange is a slow-growing grass, but it's one of the quicker Zoysia matrellas out there. People don't understand that these grasses, they're sloths. So there's been a number of ones that I've seen that just go, this stuff is just 10 out of 10. Look at the texture, look at the color. It's so shade tolerant. It's going to be so easy to look after. And you go, it just takes too long. You can't do it. Yeah. So you got to scrap it, unfortunately. But they're doing so much breeding work with Zoysias now that we're starting to get the texture and the look of the matrellas with the growth of the other Zoysias, which is Japonicas, which are a little bit more rapid in their growth rate. So they're starting to breed what they call Zoysia hybrids, which are a little bit of both. We're getting closer to getting the best of both worlds in a cultivar that we can use.
I mean, I told this to Brenton. He was shocked because I think you listened to that interview that we did with Brenton, that he sort of become the Zoysia guy. And he sort of feels like he doesn't know that much about Zoysia. So it's just a funny conversation, really. But the thing about Brenton is we were talking about it, and I was like, out of the 270 or so clients we have, I don't know how many exactly, I think only one of them is a Zoysia one over here in WA. The very next day after the podcast, we just happened to have somebody who asked us to rip out about 20 square meters of lawn that was in a very tight, crowded backyard. It was a cooch variety they wanted to put in Zoysia. I was like, that's a good idea because it's got more shade. Caught the turf farms, and they were like, we do not recommend laying it between basically the start of May till the end of August because it just doesn't root. You can do it, and as long as you're happy to take on the risk, we'll provide it for you. But it's a real shame because it does sound like there's a potential, but it seems like, well, the other one of the turf farms we called didn't even have any Zoysia available for us. And it seems like because of those real world practical things you're talking about, like growth rate or how easy it is to harvest, because it is a farm in the end of the day, they're just not prioritizing it, even though it might be a really good option. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that or misunderstanding something?
No, you're right. There's a lot more red flags that come up when a turf farm will sell you Zoysia grass as opposed to others. When I say red flags, there's a lot more questions asked and things you need to manage in order to get Zoysia to succeed, particularly if you're installing between sort of March and October in the southern states. It's just because it is slower growing, you get the wonderful benefits of slower growing once it's established, but it just needs a little bit more care to get established. You said you're a cricket fan.
I am.
I use an analogy of Sean Marsh, the great Western Australian cricketer. When he got over 10, he normally made 100 in Test cricket. He went really well, but a lot of times he struggled to get to 10. That's Zoysia grass. So it needs to be nursed so well in order to get established. But once it's established, it's beautiful. It'll score 100. Like it's a great grass. So.
I tell you what, you're winning brownie points here. You're talking about WA cricketers.
I knew that'd go down well. Yeah.
I know, mate. What are you trying to do? I'm a married man, all right? Okay.
No, it's a funny old grass, Zoysia, but I share the belief that a lot of the turf researchers and scientists we work with share, and that is Zoysia grass will one day be the dominant cultivar in home lawns in Australia.
Okay, interesting.
That's their view. It may not be 10, 20, 30 years, but their view is. And seeing what I see now, I share that view that will one day be the case. And the reason being is you take an institution like UJ, like the University of Georgia, and Dr. Brian Schwartz's program, which is up there with the best, but it's huge. Like we're talking thousands and thousands of cultivars. About 60% of their breeding is dedicated to Zoysia grass now, and that's growing. Texas A&M, who are a big St. Augustine, big buffalo grass breeder, they're now growing in Zoysia grass. And the reason they're doing it is the Zoysia cultivar, the genus, is so diverse. So when you get softleaf buffalo, it's just softleaf buffalo. Cooch is a little bit different. You get hybrid cooches and that sort of thing. But Zoysia, there's Zoysia matrella, Zoysia japonica, Zoysia macrantha, Zoysia tenuifolia, Zoysia pacifica. It is such a diverse genus, so there's more for the breeders to work with and cross with.
Right.
That's why they put a lot of work into Zoysia grass, and for that reason, they do see eventually Zoysia grass being, if not one of the most dominant cultivars in the retail landscape in Australia. So it's going to change a lot over the next few decades.
That's quite interesting because there are some challenges with Zoysia that, like we just talked about, but you're basically saying you think because of the research that's going into it, they will overcome those challenges eventually, because the potential upside is so, I guess it sounds like there's so much money that could be had from these institutions through getting an amazing Zoysia out there. It'd be so attractive for them, and they believe that that's where it could go.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's the traits that are inherent in Zoysia grass anyway. Like the look of Zoysia grass is second to none. It's a beautiful looking grass. It's slower growing. It's got good shade tolerance, and it's got low fertility requirements. So the bones are there. They've just got to teach it to run a bit faster along the ground, and it'll be a really good cultivar. But because of the diversity in the genus, they're putting a lot of work into it, and eventually that will just win over. There's so many clever people working in turf grass genetics now, and the things they can do with genetics in turf grass now, it will blow your mind, and they'll get there eventually.
Yeah, interesting. That's fascinating. How long did it take you to go from Zoysia australis, which has just been released, this year? End of last year? When was it?
This year, but mainly in southeast Queensland at the moment.
Yeah, so we can't get it over here in WA.
Not yet.
Selfish bloke. What are you doing? Share it around, right? No, I actually looked it up because when, like I said, I talked to Brenton, and the next day I had a quote, and I was like, I don't think I can get it here. I'll just Google and no, so I can't. And then there's the Primo, which you funnily accidentally announced on the video with Brenton.
Is that what he couldn't get in trouble because I did it?
Yeah,
talking of mistakes, that was one of them. But yeah, that's
was it actually?
Yeah, no, that was a Primo Zoysia is a research cultivar at the time. Until I told Brenton, look, just call it a research cultivar. Don't call it Primo because we don't want people to know it's Primo for a bunch of different reasons. Then we did the video together, and I said, "Oh yeah, you're Primo." And he said, "Oh, I thought we weren't allowed to say that." My mistake, not his. But no, that's another wonderful cultivar that they're using. It's the first Zoysia grass that they've got to reach PGA ball speeds on greens, which is the first Zoysia grass in history. So getting a warm season grass on golf greens that isn't a cooch grass is pretty exciting, and Primo Zoysia could do that. And it's got, this is the thing, like, it's a matrella and it has beautiful winter color. Like, it holds on to winter so well for a Zoysia grass, but It's just so slow.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
I think we've got Sir Grange is the variety that we've got at the property we do. Last year, it was so. We treated it a bit like a cooch, and I think we should treat it a bit more like a buffalo with the winter color loss, and given it a lot more love and attention at the start when it was going cold, because once it's gone, it's like it's gone color wise. You just can't get it back, and so I hope. I actually was supposed to go there today and check on it, so I hope that it's raining like crazy, so I haven't done anything today. But it'd be interesting to see how it's going this season, because we don't get that cold here in Perth, really. Like we don't have many minus. In fact, although having said that, apparently there was a chance of rain. Oh, sorry, chance of rain. Yeah, chance of rain. No, chance of snow in Perth, which is like newsworthy. So anyway, but we don't get that cold.
With Zoysia grass too, Sir Grange is included in this. Is Zoysia grass, its origins are Southeast Asia. When you go to Bali or Japan, you look in the street under the garden, there's Zoysia growing. So that's where its origins are. So it's bred from a tropical climate, so it's not as adaptable to winter. Sir Grange is a genetically improved Zoysia grass, so it has better adaptation to winter than common Matrella does, but its nature is still to like humid weather. That's why it does so well in the northern parts of Australia. But that's where it gets its shade tolerance from as well, because you think a humid monsoonal climate, it rains half the year, so there's no sun, there's shade cover, so it gets shade tolerance naturally bred into it. But that's the reason its adaptability further south hasn't quite come yet, or further north in the US. But they are, like I said before, they're putting a lot of effort into Zoysia grass, so it will eventually get there.
So you've just released Australis. So here's a couple of questions to get to a single point. But when did you start looking at that? How long does it take to go from concept to release to the public? And then like the question I'm really trying to get at is, you've got to keep that secret that whole time. So you got to go from a little pot all the way up to the announcement. Like that's years and years, right?
Yeah. So the concept first started in, I'm going to say 2015, when we thought there was a need for a new medium textured Zoysia grass to meet the market. So it started in 2015 on a trip to the US, when we basically say, this is putting in layman's terms, but hey, what do you got? This is what we want. What do you got? And they've got.
Sounds like a drug deal.
Yeah, it does. It sounds a little bit suspect. But in essence, that's what we say. They say, hey, we've got this, and this. These are new cultivars. These are older cultivars. This is what we're working on now. We think this will fit your bill perfectly. We imported it into Australia, that actual cultivar, I think in 2017, our 2017 batch. So we had it here for a good 4, 5, 6 years. I could have even been 16. I can't quite remember, but it was here for a good 4, 5, 6 years before we did anything major with it. But we were fortunate with Australis that they had it in the US for a couple of years already, and they'd done a bit of work on farm. So they kind of knew that it could work. It has potential.
Right.
So we started that with the back of our minds. But what we did is we didn't just bring it over. We brought 17 other Zoysias over, very, very similar to it. We don't just take their word for it and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. We'll say, hey, give us that one, but how about you give us your next 10, 20 best, whatever it was. In this case, it was 17, and Australis was consistent in our scoring over here. It wasn't the best grass 24/7, 365, but it was top 3 every single time.
Right.
And it was a real workhorse for us, and it showed great color year round and showed great texture, and it grew really well. So it was going to be efficient to produce. And it did it here. It did it in northern New South Wales, and it did it in Queensland as well. So it ticked a lot of boxes for us. And it got to the point where we were pretty serious about releasing it. But like you said, you got to keep it all a big secret. You got to grow it in on first, and you got to do a soft launch. Then you got to make sure you got enough stock to meet the market, and your marketing doesn't exceed your stock. Your stock doesn't exceed your marketing. So we're at the point, just recently. It's gonna be a bit more of a push come springtime, when we get a bit of stock in New South Wales and other areas of Australia. But it's a beautiful grass. It's got a. I don't know if you ever worked with Queensland Blue Cooch at all. It's got that. I
have about 30 centimeters of it in my own lawn.
Okay, there you go. It's got a. It's enough to work with. It's got a beautiful bluey green color that isn't replicated anywhere. Australis has that color, and people love it. Like, it is a stunning color. It's got a nice soft leaf, and it's going to be pretty adaptable to most Aussie backyards and front yards. So we think it's going to be a good grass.
Here's a cheeky question, right? I think I would do this, right? You've got a variety that you might like, and it's just not marketable, or it's like maybe it's really good at one thing, it's not good at the others. You got to get rid of it. Have you ever stolen some and just grown it in your own yard? I mean, you can resist the actual answer of that question. I would do that for sure. I would be like, I'm going to take a plug. No, come on.
I've thought about it. No one will hear this. My backyard and front yard, I've got about 1,600 meters of what I think is the best looking TifTuf in Australia. By the way, I'm going to put that.
Right.
I've been proven wrong otherwise. I think it's pretty good. But no, we've got a guy who works here. He's worked here for a number of years now. His name's Bob, and Bob helps us out on the plots and also in our warehouse. And we've got a running joke that Bob's backyard is the biggest research center in the history of the world, because every grass that we don't quite like, it ends up. He goes, I'll take it. It ends up at Bob's house, and he gives us little photos and little reports of how each grass is growing. So that's Bob. That's not me. Bob does that. He's got, it's funny.
I've got a section out in my shed, right, which is I have neglected for many years. It's just weedy dead. And it's about, I would say, 4 meters by 7 meters. So what's that, about 30 square meters or so? So it's a tiny little spot. Now my kids are getting older. I'm thinking, I should, it's just been a place for the dog to run around and dig holes in the sand. I'm like, I should install something there. I would, if I worked at a turf farm that was doing these trials, I would just steal something, like take a plug and then grow it out, and then be like, and then later on be like, well, you're going to get rid of it anyway. So I'm the only person in the country that has this specific, slightly inferior form of Zoysia.
Remind us to never give you a job, because you just confessed to stealing before you've actually done it. So
I know. Well, I've only ever really worked for myself. So it's sort of like you can't. I'm the boss. Like, I've already paid for it. It's not stealing.
No, but we have a guy that's got exactly that. His backyard's a patchwork quilt of every failed research variety we've had. So it's pretty funny.
It's just fun because it's unique. You know what I mean? It's a good story. Somebody comes over, what grass is this? And it's like, well, actually, it's not good enough for them to sell, but I've got it.
But
as if that's some bragging point.
It's a good thing to do, because even some of the grass, even if you're thinking about releasing them, we do try to get them into situations, obviously, before we release them, so we know as much about it as we possibly can. So if you've got an area that's struggling, that's generally where we tell you to put it. Because the hardest thing, or I've said the hardest thing about 3 times, one of the hardest things about
the 6 hardest things.
The 6 hardest things. Hardest thing number 7 is that when you get a grass like Australis, for example, you have to grow it, you have to look at it, and you have to maintain it. But you're on a timeline too. But when you're ready to go to market, you still don't know what happens to that grass after 5 years in the backyard.
That's
and
true.
There's some stuff that you just got to run with. And trust and hope it goes well. Because you take, Sir Walter, for example, it's been in the market for 20-something years now. We know everything there is to know about Sir Walter, but even TifTuf and Sir Grange, we're just getting to the point now where we're seeing how it goes after 5 or 6 years and learning more about it all the time. So that's one of the difficult things and the real unknowns about releasing a new grass is you don't know how it goes with shade and kids after 3 years, because you just haven't done it. So you sort of got to do a lot of learning as you go.
Do you do? I think I know the answer to this, because I think you did this on with Brenton's video. But you test out your competitor stuff as well, don't you?
Yeah, we do a lot of competitor analysis. It's one of the main things we do, and we've got the room to do it at our research facility here. So part of our facility here is dedicated to grasses that we actually have available now. So Sir Grange, TifTuf, Primo, whatever it is, because at the start it was just research, and people would come along and go, oh, that grass is great. And we go, well, you can't buy it. So we dedicated a section to grass having now. Another section is dedicated to our research and buffaloes and our Zoysias. And then another section is dedicated to competitor analysis. So whenever we have a cultivar, let's take Australis, for example, we will put it in our analysis trial with grasses that are similar to it, be it, whatever type of Zoysia grass it is. Same with TifTuf, we'll throw it in with a bunch of other couch grasses, and we'll monitor that to make sure it really stands out, because we don't want to release something that's this much better, 1%, 2% better. It's got to be noticeably better for us to consider releasing it. So we do a lot of that.
Do you get annoyed when you see people online buy a variety that you know is inferior, and you're like, "Come on, man, you should go without some of our stuff"?
Yeah, I guess I do, but there's a lot of great grasses on the market now, and all these new ones that come out, these institutions that breed them don't release them unless they're a good cultivar.
Okay.
So there's so many good grasses now. I get a little bit annoyed when the wrong thing gets said because people see it online now and they instantly believe it when it could be so
Yeah.
far from the truth. It's not funny. So like on these social forums, like Lawn Fanatics, for example, these are unreal. These have people talking about lawns all the time, but does get a bit annoying, and this is no fault of the people that run the pages at all, but someone will ask a question, they'll get 9 wrong responses and a right one, and they have to filter through and try and work out which one's correct. So that annoys me a little bit, but the moderators on those pages do an awesome job of keeping that at bay. But I do get annoyed when the wrong thing gets
Well,
said
give me some examples. What's the sort of stuff? What I like, I'll tell you, while you're thinking of some examples, some bad stories, bad advice. What I really like is, and maybe this is just self-congratulatory, but the WA Lawn Addicts, which I've been quite involved in, thankfully the pages put people as group experts.
Yeah.
Or you can put someone as a group expert. And I've been, marked as a group expert, which is quite nice, but they're not just me. There's a few others, and it does make a big difference when you got 3 or 4 idiots who have commented, and if you don't have a title and you comment and somebody doesn't know who you are, you're just another normal person. But now that they've got the group expert thing on there, you can get people who actually have experience come in, be the 9th or 10th comment and make sense, and then it shuts down some of the idiot stuff. But what sort of idiot ideas and stuff do you see being floated around about lawn installation or varieties or complaints or whatever?
I guess the main ones we have to watch is around herbicide use and people recommending products that they shouldn't be recommending to the average Joe lawn user. There's a lot of products out there that you have to apply at a certain time of year with a calibrated sprayer. You got to have a chem cert. You've got to be a licensed person to do it. And on these forums now, they just go, "Oh, mate, spray it with this or spray it with that." And these people go, "Oh, well, where do I even buy it from? What do I do?" But that's the biggest bugbear I have and I know it gets addressed a lot now is getting people to use people like yourself who actually know what they're doing with these products, because a lot of the products that get recommended now are not off the shelf products. You have to have you got to have a chem cert and you've got to be a licensed person to do it. They're golf course products, they're management products. So that annoys me a bit where people can sort of just throw it out there that, hey, how about you go and spray Monument on this stuff and it'll fix it up, where you got to really know what you're doing. But the moderators, the group experts is a great thing because that's getting knocked on the head a lot now. The other thing we see a lot of is people are so dedicated to their particular turf variety now. And this is great.
Yep.
Like there's a massive war out there now, particularly with couch grasses. Like there's a bunch of new couches on the market. We have one of them. And it's so good to see people being so passionate. But it does get annoying to see sometimes people say things about your products or your brand that are simply untrue. And you just feel like going on there sometime and going, hey guys, this is not actually factual. But it's a social forum. You got to take the good with the bad. And sometimes you just got to accept it and roll with the punches. But
well, there's been a lot of conversation lately around. So you guys got TifTuf. There's a new one called Tahoma 31. I don't think that's got anything to do with you guys, right?
No.
And there's a lot of hype around that, and I wonder as well with the sometimes it's just the new is fancy, and old is boring, and you might have. And we talked about this actually with Travis from the Lawn Lab, one of our earlier episodes. He's got a patch of Tahoma 31 and he bought it and he's been using it. And he's like, oh, there's some things about it that are great. But ultimately, if you don't care for the lawn, it's not going to look good anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
And sometimes what happens is that someone will buy a TifTuf or they'll buy even like, so let's not even use different brand names to say, let's say someone gets Cooch, just any variety of Cooch. And then they don't treat it right and it dies. And they will call a company like us and go, and literally this happened like the other week. I rocked on someone's house. The sprinkler system is rooted. The dogs have been digging holes through the lawn. The soil is essentially beach sand, right? And they're like, oh, I want you to rip it up and plant it again, but I don't want to get Cooch. You didn't do very well here. It's like, do you think Buffalo would have done well here? Like, do you think Kikuyu, like nothing would have done well here. It's just the environment. So people, it's funny, you'll get sometimes where they will do things like that, and then the pro will come in and install a different type of grass. And so they are just convinced, because the pro did all the prep work, the pro set the reticulation system, made it function properly, and then they laid whatever they laid, there was success because the fundamentals were done right. And they're like, oh, this other one sucks, and the one I've got now is better. Well, I don't know about that,
And they can tell 100 people straight away by clicking a button, and 100 people believe them straight away. So that's the issue. But grass always gets the blame. Grass is just the pretty stuff on top. All the work goes into the prep and the initial care. And grass brands now, because they're so prominent, which is great, they do get slammed and praised just as easily and just as quickly. And now it's not about telling your neighbor it's bad. It's about jumping online and 100 or 1,000 people see it straight away. But these things are great. Like, I love these forums. I think the more people we've got talking about lawns, the better. And I think the COVID period, the lockdown period really helped this, because people realized they had a backyard. And then people started taking care of their backyard and becoming really passionate. And like I said, whilst there's some negative stuff about it, I think overwhelmingly it's positive, and it's great that people are into their lawns. We love it. Yeah.
Well, mate, we're at an hour 26. That time flew. The first hour was like, what happened? I thought we were just starting.
Talked about the Dragons for 20 minutes, and now rugby. It's rugby league and not rugby, but we got the grass eventually. It's good.
No, we did. Look, I've had a lot of fun with this. I think we could probably keep talking for 6 or 7 hours, but the reality is that, people probably turn us off. We'd have fun. They'd probably get bored of it. What I would say is jump on, if you guys have any questions about varieties. I've spent quite a bit of time on the Lawn Solutions website over the years, when you're just doing research for different jobs, things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff. You guys have got, how many different Zoysias do you have?
There's Australis, there's Segrange that are available, readily, and then there's specialist Zoysias like Primo Zoysia, Platinum Zoysia that you can get, for a certain market, for a certain use. But Segrange and Australis are the two main ones.
Well, so you've got TifTuf, you've got there's a Kikuyu, isn't there? So Water DNA.
Water DNA. There's Eureka Kikuyu and Nullarbor Cooch, which are your generic type Cooch and Kikuyu grasses. So they will vary from area to area. So the Nullarbor you get in Brisbane will be different to the Nullarbor you get in Victoria. It's whatever common Cooch grass is best suited. So it might be Santa Ana in Victoria and Wintergreen in Brizzy. TifTuf and then Water DNA certified. We're at the point now where we've got a grass for every situation. It's just it's a matter of the customer asking the right questions and getting the right information, and any of these grasses will be suitable for each person. It's just a matter about finding out what's best for you.
If you're a novice on there as well, they've got all these comparison stuff. I have found this really helpful when I was looking into different things back in the day. You got shade tolerance and high wear or low wear. What's the maintenance like? What's the estimated cost? What type of leaf? So for somebody who's a beginner and maybe you're listening to this, you're getting into the industry, you're wanting to learn about that sort of stuff, do that. Another thing that I recommend, which I have done in the past, was I actually made a raised garden bed out of sleepers. It cost me about $120, and it was about 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, and I had 4 different spots. It was about 125 mil deep sleeper, and I filled those 4. It looked like a big ladder when it was lying down on the ground. I filled them with soil, and I bought 1 square meter from the turf farm of every different variety they had. I got a Zoysia, a Buffalo, a Cooch, and a Kikuyu. I recommend that you do that. Have a look at some of this stuff. Put it in the same position if you can. Water it, treat it with love and respect, and just see get that experience, because that is going to really help your career going forward. If you've got any other questions about this sort of stuff, I'm sure Lawn Solutions are happy to answer everything. What's your favorite color? Where's the best ice cream to buy in Southeast Queensland? They will help you. Is that right? No?
We'll answer any question. You can find us a bunch of different ways too. You can call us, you can email us, you can jump on our Facebook page. I spend a fair chunk of my day every day still helping people with their lawns. So
that's awesome.
If you ever got a question, you can jump on and we'll be happy to help you out.
And definitely don't send Joe a message talking about rugby when you actually mean league, okay?
I didn't get that angry, did I?
No. But I like hyping it up, it's all about the story.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, man. I've had fun with this podcast. Thanks for coming on. And you know what? Hopefully we'll see you again one day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Luke. Appreciate it.